The negotiations in the engineering sector began in June of this year, and from the onset it was tense. We had very, very difficult discussions. You'll understand, and I think you'll remember, that we were at the beginning very far apart from each other. NUMSA was demanding 15%, the sector was only offering 5%. But to make matters worse, employers had put backward proposals on the table, which we felt would have resulted in the basic conditions of our members being eroded. So, for example, they were trying to implement the national minimum wage through the back door, something which we were vociferously opposed to. They tried to also remove some of the leave benefits for some of our members. So really, we were on very extreme opposite ends. Mm-hmm. We deadlocked at some point in the negotiations, and we were actually headed towards a strike. But it was really because there was a lot of talks that took place between ourselves and the Employer Association, SEIFSA. We had intense negotiations, which took some time, but eventually we came to an agreement, which we have now signed as of today.
Your people who are part of the union were expecting you to come back with the 50% that you went to employers with. This 7% now, how is it going to improve their lives or make a difference? Because it's half of what you were asking for, less than half.
That's true. As NUMSA, we always demand a double-digit increase, at least. So even if it's not 15%, it must be a double-digit increase. So for us, we would have settled, for example, on 10%. So in this instance, we did not get that 10%. We have compromised, we've lost out on 3%, but we believe that there's various factors that forced us into a compromise, and I think ultimately that is what wage talks are about. It is a give and take. It is about people coming together, thrashing out issues, and finding a deal which suits most people. Mm-hmm. We admit that this is not an ideal agreement, but we have spent a lot of time canvassing our members, consulting with our members, and also basically just educating them and showing them about where some of the issues are when it comes to the wage talks. We compromised for the sake of the bargaining process and for centralized bargaining. We could have demanded 10%, gone on strike, and probably won. We could have probably got 10% for some of the other bigger companies. But that would have resulted in disadvantages for us going forward. Mm-hmm. It would have resulted in the central bargaining structure collapsing, for example. It would have resulted in more instability in the sector. It probably would have resulted in more job losses, as some of the companies would not have been able to afford it, considering the economic
Gordon
situation.
Angus, who's the executive director of SAFA, said that this negotiation, this 7%, even though it's a compromise, is going to damage the sector because small and medium enterprises are not going to be able to hire people, which I think is what you were alluding to now. What's your response to that?
We disagree with that. We believe that this is actually the best deal for everybody in the sector. You have to understand that this is a sector that does not pay very well. The lowest paid worker is at 40 Rand per hour, 43 Rand now that we've now just reached an increase. And the reality is that what we were asking for when we were demanding 15% would have translated to a 6 Rand increase for our members. The fact of the matter is that there are a lot of employers out there who are not even paying members the minimum of 40 Rand per hour, which frankly is disgraceful, because what our members are earning, I mean, they're taking home probably less than approximately 6,000 Rand a month. And they're expected to survive on that with extremely high, extreme high cost of living. And I think whilst employers are expecting us to be mindful of the economic situation, they need to be mindful of the situation and the circumstances facing our members. Our members live in abject poverty. The majority of them live in shacks, not because they choose to, but because frankly they cannot afford better accommodation. They spend more than 50% of their salaries on public transportation. So we've been hearing these excuses from employers for many, many years. Even when they're doing well, those gains never get passed on to workers. I think the time has come now and I think a lot of people are starting to recognize this when we look at the crisis facing us with the triple threat of unemployment, poverty, and inequality, The only way we're going to deal with inequality in this country is if the employers, if the bosses, if the capitalists in this country come to an understanding and an acceptance that to tackle inequality, the first way through that is to ensure that wages, you give workers a living wage. Anything less than a living wage is going to cause a crisis. And I think that is where all employers, that is the direction we all need to move to if we're going to stabilize this industry.